Ever wonder why overcoming a drug addiction is so difficult? Well, you are at the right place because you will explore the science of drug addictions here. Before understanding how drugs affect the brain, it is important to know how neurotransmission functions. Let's start with the neuron. A neuron is a nerve cell, and the brain is made of billions of neurons. Neurons send and receive messages through the branches of the cell. The smaller branches on the sides are called dendrites. Dendrites receive messages from other neurons. The one long branch is called the axon. The axon sends messages to other neurons. The action potential is the electrochemical signal that an axon sends when triggered. The end of the axon is where communication between neurons occurs. Let's zoom in to see exactly what happens. Here is the synapse. The synapse is the gap between the axon terminal of one neuron and the dendrite of another neuron, where messages are sent. The axon terminal is depicted on the left, and can be referred to as the presynaptic neuron. To the right is the dendrite, also known as the postsynaptic neuron. The axon terminal contains neurotransmitters, which are chemical messengers sent across the synapse to relay a signal. The dendrite contains receptor sites. Receptor sites are proteins to which neurotransmitters bind in order for a neuron to receive messages. Action potentials trigger neurotransmitters to be released. After the neurotransmitters are received by the receptor sites, the neurotransmitters undergo a process called reuptake. This is when neurotransmitters are reabsorbed by the presynaptic neuron to be reused later. Depending on the type of neurotransmitter, the messenger can either stimulate the next neuron to send an action potential, or inhibit the chance of an action potential being sent. This was just the basic process of neurotransmission. But what happens when you introduce a drug into the system? To start, there are two main types of drugs categorized by how the drugs affect neurotransmission, and they are agonists and antagonists. Within each of the two types, there are two subcategories. First are agonists. Agonists are drugs that trigger the effect of a surplus of neurotransmitters. One of the two subcategories is the direct-acting agonist. Direct-acting agonists attach onto the receptor sites to mimic the effect of a natural neurotransmitter. The other subcategory for agonists is the indirect-acting agonist. Indirect-acting agonists interact with the presynaptic axon to cause a hyperrelease or an excess of neurotransmitters in the synapse. Then there are antagonists. Antagonists are a type of drug that block neurotransmission. Again, there are two subcategories, the first being direct-acting antagonists. Direct-acting antagonists attach to the postsynaptic receptors and block the ability of neurotransmitters to attach onto receptors. The second subcategory is indirect-acting agonists. These drugs interact with this presynaptic neuron to prevent neurotransmitters from being released. The neurotransmitters, if affected by the drug, would never enter the synapse. Now that you understand how drugs affect the brain, it is time for the big question. Why is overcoming a drug addiction so difficult? To answer this, cocaine will be used as an example to demonstrate the addictive powers a drug holds. Cocaine interacts with dopamine-releasing neurons. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter associated with happiness and reward. If something causes more dopamine to be released, the brain encourages the person to repeat the action that caused the dopamine to be released. During reuptake, dopamine re-enters into the presynaptic neuron through transport proteins. Cocaine creates a surplus of dopamine in the synapse by preventing reuptake. The drug blocks these transport channels, and dopamine cannot be reabsorbed. After using cocaine, the brain does not feel satisfied with the natural level of dopamine produced. The brain alerts the person to repeat the action that caused the extra dopamine, in this case, taking cocaine. Tolerance is the decreased response to a drug. Every time the drug user takes cocaine, the tolerance for cocaine increases. This means that more of the drug is needed every time to feel the effects of the drug. In short, drugs alter the biochemical arrangement in the brain. This is why drugs are addicting and should not be taken lightly. Now that you're full of knowledge, go out and spread the word. Thanks for watching!